This week, we interview Heather Mahalik from the SANS Institute on mobile phone forensics. In our listener feedback, kind of an interesting one this week, I call it the host perspective. It's all those questions that we have in common that we ask our guests that we're going to ask of ourselves because our listeners are like, what are your answers to those questions? So look forward to that segment. In our security news in the week, we've got all kinds of stories, including hacking smart cities, Americans want passwords, Epic Games forums hacked, VxWorks security issues, and facial recognition that can be tricked with a Facebook photo. All that and more, so stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly is brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security training, certification, and research. Visit SANS.org to explore the full curriculum and latest training offerings. Onapsis, the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, the Pwn Phone, and the Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com.
And welcome to the show. Because here's your host. He's a man who can do his own facial recognition after analyzing thousands of hours of porn. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, joined here in studio by Mr. Larry Pesce. Welcome, Larry.
Good to be back.
Yes.
Again. I look forward to Thursdays.
Thursdays are good.
Thursdays are good. That means I can start the weekend of drinks off early. I mean, I go to this fantastic security podcast.
On the lines via Skype, Mr. Joff Thayer has joined us. Welcome, Joff, to the show.
G'day, Paul. G'day, Larry. It's another wonderful Thursday evening. And you know what that means? It means it's Friday Eve.
Ooh.
Now
We've got some fabulous cocktails, Larry. What did you made a Sazerac.
The Sazeracs, yep. Yeah,
Oh,
and we didn't have rye, so...
Is it a Sazerac or a Sazerac?
I think it's a Sazerac.
Sazerac?
He said cock. I was sort of stuck.
Either way, it's supposed to be with rye, and we only have bourbon, and they're pretty close.
Rye was on the list. I don't know how it fell off the list. I thought I had Old Overholt on the list.
It's okay.
To make
We made
the
it with
Smoking
bourbon.
Hot Acidorian, which actually we can't make because we're out of tobacco liqueur. So if anyone makes a donation to the show, that if you can find tobacco liqueur, because I can't find it anywhere, and I have to order it online, and it's, as we say in Rhode Island, wicked expensive.
Yep.
Well, you know, the real problem is that Jack's not in studio to make you the Sazerac. I mean...
Yep. Well, the only difference between mine and Jack's, I guess, was the absence of rye, and we used bourbon, which is...
I find it comes out smoother with bourbon. It doesn't have as much bite. I like it.
I do too.
I like it.
What,
It pairs
yours
better with a
has
cigar.
absinthe and rye? What?
Yep.
I'm confused.
Absinthe and rye. It's only a couple of drops of absinthe that you swirl around in the bottom of the glass.
Yes.
And then if there's anything left, you basically pour it out.
I do that with vermouth for my martinis.
Yep. And
as well.
Jack
Because
actually...
we're old now, and that's how we roll.
And at home, I do the same thing Jack does, is he has like an olive oil spritzer with absinthe in it, and you just spritz the inside of the glass.
Spritz it.
Oh, wow, that's serious. That's serious
Yes.
making paraphernalia.
Yes.
Quick announcement, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe and subscribe to all of our new shows, including Enterprise Security Weekly and Startup Security Weekly. You can also subscribe to all of the shows individually, or if you're used to listening to the main feed, you know that in the main feed, I call it the main feed, but you get Hack Naked TV, Enterprise Security Weekly, and this show in one feed. Or if you want to subscribe to everything
Is
individually.
Startup Security Weekly in the main feed?
It is not. I don't want to crowd
Got
the
it.
main feed too much at this point. Because there's like a new episode every other day. I mean, depending on our schedule.
Yep.
So I don't want
Yep.
to bombard listeners.
So it's kind of the bundle and save argument.
It's the
Oh,
bundle
wait.
and save. It is the
Yeah.
bundle and save. I am going to stick like 1 or 2 episodes of Startup in the feed when there's like a lull, and just to kind of introduce the show to some of our listeners, because it's a more like obviously startup and like business oriented show, but it's got a security angle. It's myself and Michael Santarcangelo.
Right.
And I share, if you're interested in hearing about how I'm embarking on the journey of having a security startup, that is the show to listen to. It's quite entertaining.
And-
So Michael's like, so Paul, how are you dealing with in your startup? I'm like, oh, we need to deal with that? Crap. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
And
and
also
then
the other perspective is that you're providing quote security advice to startups.
To
like
startups,
things that they
absolutely.
should think about when they're doing startup when
Like
that may
how-
not be security, like
how
IoT
much,
or
like how much effort should you put into security based on how much people care about security? And it's kind of interesting. I've definitely been seeing a shift in focus from the general public consumer, like not caring at all, like what is security, to now caring about security and privacy. Especially, we actually just covered an article on the most recent episode about how with IoT, the slower adoption rate was basically based on, 46% of people in the survey said, yes, security and privacy
Interesting.
are why I won't have a lock that is for them wireless enabled.
Yep.
We know it's usually
Yeah,
Zigbee or
I mean,
Z-Wave.
that's a real perception shift.
It is.
And some other interesting stuff too is that I know we're getting off the rails on this one, but even talking about how much you should consider budgeting up front for some of your initial rollouts that you've done some
Yes.
due diligence, and then adding to that later, because if you're in startup mode, maybe you don't have a ton of money, you don't have
Right.
$110,000 to go and devote to hardware.
And we
hardware
talk a lot
analysis.
about how we've had multiple conversations, security and even non-security related, like the decisions you make early on. Yeah, it might get you faster to market, but like how much is that going to cost you down the line?
Yeah.
And like you're going to pay for that.
Yep. It's a
somewhere.
delicate balance.
Yeah.
That's right after you answer the question that Mike's going to ask every time, and that is
What problem are we trying to solve?
problem
How
are we
tall
trying
do
to
you need to be to ride the ride?
fundamental question.
Fundamental
The
questions.
101s.
In this segment, it's listener feedback, but it's called a host's perspective. Over the years, a lot of listeners have given us feedback, and they said, you asked a guest like all these interesting and cool questions, but we feel like we don't get to hear the host answer to a lot of those questions. Now, I have 9 questions here. There's no way all 3 of us are going to answer 9 questions
We could probably
in 3,
we could do it.
maybe in 3 hours.
because some of them are pretty quick.
Some
like,
of them are pretty quick. Like, what
So-
color underwear are you wearing?
So in the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First.
A second, because I like
Joff?
I like to know that there's a motive already established.
I'm a first guy.
See,
I like to get right in there. I can't. I gotta.
see, after you're right in there, I know your intentions. So
You knew that before we started playing, Larry.
I like to jump right in and then have grips.
and that wasn't even on the list of questions.
It wasn't, but that was good. So we answered
we've
one.
answered one, and now we've got to answer 10, right?
Who wants to take how you got your start in information security?
Oh, I'll take that one.
All right, Joe.
I'd be happy to take that one too.
So,
We got time.
actually, this to me is my favorite question to discuss at conferences. Like DerbyCon is coming up, so I'm looking forward to having some bar discussions there. So the reason I say that, I'm trying to keep it short, but the reason I say that is I have a lot of people say, well, how do you know what you know? How do you do what you do? And it relates to this question. I had, from my perspective, a long career, like 18 years before I even entered the information security field. And those 18 years were a combination of systems administration
And stripping.
software development. I see you making faces.
Stripping.
Killing koalas.
Killing koalas. No, the
Making love to kangaroos.
making love. Yeah, they kick hard. They push back.
Didn't need to know that.
Even when you have them against the cliff. I mean,
No, that's the sheep. The sheep definitely.
Oh, Joff is an expert in this subject.
yes. And quite surprisingly, it all ties into security somehow.
Serious. I was trying to get serious, and look what you guys are doing.
Well, that's because we saw you trying to get serious.
But I tell you, the thing that really drove me there, and I think Paul could relate to this, was the latter part of that tenure, doing network infrastructure and network architecture work that actually slowly deviated its way towards being able to defend large networks against completely unmanaged endpoints, and that's what drew me towards information security ultimately.
Larry, what about yourself?
I again, somewhat similar. I was doing, 24/7 network design support, having come out of website design and desktop support and end user support, and had done that whole path, and ended up, doing network support, and was, doing both design and implementation and management day to day of networks, as well as internet connectivity and firewalls, and maintaining like Linux servers and doing sysadmin work. And then I moved into my first apartment where we had high-speed internet that wasn't dial-up, and we got hacked the first week we were living there, because it was Red Hat 6.0 timeframe, and
we used to put Red Hat 6.0 and 6.2 servers up on when we got high-speed internet, and then they would all get hacked.
Yeah, because use them as a NAT firewall, because at the time the provider here would only support one IP unless you wanted to buy more, and they didn't support NAT firewalling or anything, so you had to do it on your own.
It was kind of looked at as like an annoyance. Like I remember my friends, my one friend taught me Linux. Was like, these hackers keep getting in. It's just highly annoying. And I just kick them out and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't a big deal. It was like, well, yeah, we got hacked, whatever. Yeah, they put a bunch of wares on. Remember wares? Like, they put a bunch of wares on.
Yeah, so mine got used for doing ICMP ping flooding.
Well, that's bad, because then you lose your internet.
Exactly. And that's how I figured it out, because all of a sudden my internet got really slow. And I started looking at the firewall, and like, why is all this ICMP traffic? And, they're using Loki. Messaging over ICMP to communicate with the box, because it was a Red Hat 6 box that I was a Linux noob at the time. So when you go to install, it's like, what do you need to install? Well, the everything button, and the everything button installs everything and starts all the services exposed to the internet, so
including anonymous FTP,
everything,
Telnet,
X server, and everything. And it got popped, and they were using it for stuff, and I took it offline and replaced it with another box and figured out what the hell they did. And, it was like 2 weeks in my living room sitting down looking at what they had done and figuring out how to do forensics, and having to go to Google and figure out how to do forensics and all that stuff, and get to work a couple weeks later and they got hacked.
Yep.
And it was, hey, Larry, you remember that thing you told us about you did at home? Yeah. Well, now you get to do it at work.
Sweet.
And 3 days without sleep later, we get it cleaned up. And a month after that, it happened all over again. A little different scenario, though. And they said, boy, we should take this seriously.
We should get a security guy.
You're
the security guy.
Yeah, you're it.
Volunteered.
My story's really...
And that was 13 years ago.
My story's really easy, actually. I can put it in like one sentence. I was a sysadmin, and the firewall guy got sick. Like, seriously, that's the whole story.
And not just sick. He got sick.
Yeah, he was. I actually felt really bad for him, because he was a super nice guy, and actually, before he went out on long-term medical leave, which would ultimately be permanent medical leave, I don't know what ever happened to him either. This is in like 2001, 2000? 2000. Yeah, I don't know whatever happened to him, but he had this huge bookshelf of all the security and network books, and that's where I got my first copy of TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 1 and all that stuff. So,
and that thinking about that, that was much earlier that I got into security. It was longer than 13 years ago, because it was before I got married, and we're coming up on our 14th wedding anniversary coming up. So yeah,
that's how I got into security. Yeah. Basically, it kind of
just thrown into it,
blossomed from there.
Yep.
So let's see. What's the next question? Hold on. So, what's the most challenging part of your security career today? Let's talk about today.
Today?
I mean, the past is the past. Let's talk about today. I like today.
Should we go in rotation? Same rotation?
Go ahead, John.
I'll go first. So, I think for me, today it's when I work really, really hard on an engagement, pen testing engagement. I work really hard to make solid and sound recommendations, deliver those all back to the customer, have the discussion, and then it completely gets ignored. That is challenging from the frustration perspective.
And then they ask you to retest it to say we fixed all of our stuff, and no, you haven't.
Well, I mean, I feel like I've been taken for granted, even though I get paid and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I still feel like I've been taken for granted, and that bothers me. So that's mine.
Okay. I think today is still the same as the next half of the question. It's been staying up to date and finding time to investigate every cool tool that comes out and know how to use it and do all of the actual projects you want to make this better.
Yep.
Time and staying current.
I would agree with that. It takes so much time and effort. I was going to say that, but I knew one of us would say it anyway.
And quite honestly, if it hadn't been for us starting to do this podcast 10 years ago, I would not be in the same place that I am today.
Absolutely.
Because it forced me to stay up to date every week.
That's part of the reason why I started it. So for me, it definitely my challenges are in the security startup. And I think the biggest challenge is not knowing what the next challenge is going to be and not knowing how to deal with the next challenge because you don't know what it's going to be. Because there's always new challenges, and they just come fast and furious when you're in startup mode. So for me, it's more of a startup thing rather than some of the more technical thing. On the more technical side, the challenge is time, right? To do kind of along the same lines what you're saying, Larry, and Joff to a certain extent is just time to look at all of the stuff. So, what devices and software make common appearances in your lab?
Oh wow. For me, if I didn't have an ESX server, I would be in a World of Hurt or some sort of virtual server because I like to be able to pop up lots of virtual machines on a whim. Certainly, lots of virtualization on the desktop as well. Oodles and oodles of wireless gadgets, Bluetooth gadgets, Raspberry Pis, Odroids. Wow, the list is just long. Lots of toys. That's about. I mean, I could go on and on, but I can't really inventory them right now.
Yeah, so I had Joff not too far off. Lots of wireless gear, various IoT devices in all sorts of states. But some of the things that are the more common stuff: ESXi, Linux of all varieties, Raspberry Pi. We've had this discussion many times. I think I've got 5 Pis online, sort of been permanently installed now.
That's my answer. Raspberry Pis, man. Because I think the newer models really have impressed me greatly with the flexibility and low cost.
I haven't moved past my B pluses yet. I'm still using B plus. I have 2s and I have 3s, and quite honestly, I haven't taken them out of the box yet. I just haven't had the need to.
Raspberry Pis to me are like that, second drink or third drink at the bar where you're just like, yeah, I'll have one more. And it's never one more. And Raspberry Pi is like, once you get your first couple, you're like, well,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of addicted now. Like, what? I need to do more with these.
Right. Yeah. For me, the big one is like doing all this hardware stuff. And hardware, all that stuff. There's tons of that. It's virtualization is great until you need to connect it to a piece of hardware, and then it's like, wow.
So, a large part of my lab, as it were, is really now like the podcast network. And you've seen the stuff in the gear, and you're like, you must be thinking, like, Paul, that was the stuff like in your lab. And I'm like, yeah, I had to kind of take my lab and make it do the podcast. And I'm in the same, what you were just saying, Larry. I'm like, I can't really I mean, I could, but when you virtualize a USB driver for an audio device.
No.
Is it still no? Am I correct? I mean, write in if you think I'm wrong here.
It's better, but no.
I don't. I feel like I'm going to introduce more problems than I'm solving. So a lot of my time spent in lab time is testing out smaller PCs, smaller devices, to see how small of a form factor. I want low power, I want low temperature, and I want low maintenance. And so a lot of my time actually in my lab is spent testing those kind of devices. In fact, one project we're going to take on is interesting along these lines. We got one of those little like Zotac boxes. They look like a USB hard drive.
Yeah.
I forget the model of the one we have, and I think Aaron wants to put Linux on it because there's some software that works with Chromecast that lets you broadcast stuff to any TV that has Chromecast on it. So to get rid of a lot of these HDMI cables that we have for the studio,
Right.
So that's
so,
something. I'm
So this was my stack of pies yesterday.
nice,
Like a bunch of B
That's a stack of
pluses, a
pies.
2,
Yeah.
3, the cameras, and the 9-inch LCD touchscreen, and those are all the ones that are still in the box. So,
Wow.
It's a lot
I
of pies.
forgot to mention on the list of gear, the other thing that I do, less so these days, but I do have sort of this handful of networking gear that I keep around, things like switches and wireless access points and stuff like that. And also network emulators like GNS3, for example, to run like Cisco iOS images so that I can build out networks if I need to virtually. So,
Nice.
That's
good. So if you were to build the new Raspberry Pi, what would you do with it?
This was very timely, but Joff's got to go first.
Oh, okay. Well, my answer's simple because it's based on a recent show. I would put the DNS black hole and TachyonNet software on it and run it as a Bitbucket / black hole entity on my network.
Yeah, see, that was my answer too. I think that's a perfect usage for a Raspberry Pi.
Yep. So coincidentally enough, I have a Pi on a project that I'm actually working on right now.
That's a big Pi. Oh, that's just a kit.
Yeah, it's just a case and cables and stuff. And so it's a work in progress. So serial connection so that I can connect to it, USB cable to plug it in and power it. But the other one is this unusually long piece of wire that's not connected to anything else, which happens to be an antenna.
I was going to say that's an antenna. Isn't it?
And my intern and I are implementing.
You have an intern now?
I do. It's awesome. My intern and I are implementing a POXAG pager transmitter on a Raspberry Pi. So that you can send pages from this and have them decoded with Multimon NG.
Nice.
Because the deal is that it's largely illegal to decode POXAG pager traffic that's not destined for you, and most of the time if you're going to do the transmission is in frequency ranges that are licensed. So we can do that in the traditional FM broadcast range, which you are allowed by law to use a low-powered transmitter.
So basically, you can send your own pages in an open spectrum, so that you can sniff them, so that you can do demonstrations.
And you can grant people permission to intercept, so you can do that legally.
That's cool.
Nice.
So is that for class?
It
your
most
class?
certainly
Yeah, I was going
is.
to say that sounds like it's going to be in a class. Yeah,
it most certainly is.
That's great. What is the number one thing you would do or exploit to compromise the security of an organization? If you had to pick one thing. I think everyone's answer is the same.
Social engineering. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, phishing.
Yeah,
passwords, which kind of plays into that whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You use social engineering to develop your phishing to collect passwords.
Yeah.
Right.
Done.
And we've actually done relatively well doing password spraying techniques.
Yeah.
Across public internet-facing resources.
It's interesting in an article. Did I have an article in this show? Yeah. People want passwords in a survey.
Save it.
It's kind of interesting that we all said, yeah, pretty much people and passwords is how we get in.
The other one that I would argue, if I had to go do something internal as an insider threat, Responder.
Responder?
Responder.
What do you mean?
The tool, Responder.
What is Responder?
So it sits and listens for LMNR advertisements and broadcasts. And it is effectively sitting there listening on the network in promiscuous mode, waiting for packets to go by that contain net NTLM v2 authentication credentials.
Oh.
So you're sitting there listening and capturing credentials, which you then crack, which then you use to get onto a system, and then you start leveraging that system to query Active Directory to find other systems where domain admins have logged in, and then you go from there.
Nice. How's that any different, Larry, from the Metasploit modules related to link local multicast broadcast stuff?
I don't know, because I haven't looked at the ones in Metasploit, because quite honestly, I haven't used Metasploit in close to 8 months or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that it's been all Responder and then native tools.
Yeah, I think they're similar then. The LLMNR.
Yeah, that one.
Otherwise known as NetBIOS.
Yes, NetBIOS and such.
But yeah, collecting credentials from broadcast is freaking awesome.
Joff, what's the most favorite piece of technology in your home?
Favorite piece of technology in my home? Wow, that's a tough one. Wow, that is a tough one. I don't really have favorites. There's a lot of technology in
I
my
love
home.
all the. That's like the nerdiest.
I
answer
love
ever.
all the things.
I love all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I love all the things. Oh, I don't know. You know, I will say this. I think the digital video recorder is one of my favorites. The DVR has to be one of my all-time favorites. Now, security ramifications of using it.
Probably pretty low.
Yeah.
It's,
On the
it's
DVR.
another device potentially on your network that's vulnerable to some sort of attack.
My TiVo
It-
for a long time had an outdated version of Flash on it. I don't know how you would exploit that, but it had an outdated version of Flash on it.
Well, you know, these days you don't know if your firmware is not calling home. You know, because
It's true,
things that happen.
because things that are manufactured
Yeah.
in China. But
I think I actually just threw out my TiVos.
did you really?
I did.
We use the cable provider's DVR now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually
'Cause
bought
the-
another one.
the
I
stuff
bought
that-
another recent one. They're pretty good.
The stuff that I've got was all standard DAF,
Mhm.
and we're all HD now, and I'm stuck in the HD
Mhm.
world. But yeah, and I'm kind of with Joff on the DVR thing. If I had to pick the one technology, it would be the TV. I hate to say it, 'cause I'm a sucker for a good story, and TV delivers those, and
Mhm.
sometimes without having to think while I type on the computer at the same time.
Yes.
Well, I
Although-
think the ability
yeah.
to store it and watch it later
Absolutely.
is huge.
absolutely.
Without really thinking about it. The
our,
program that
our
program-
kids have no concept of a commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like-
See, I don't use the DVR as much as I use Amazon Prime and Netflix.
Well,
It's-
that
it's
kind of
a-
goes.
Yeah, kind of the same thing
Mm.
because there's no commercials and you
Right.
can watch content on demand.
Right.
What you want when you want. Same thing with the
And
DVR.
I buy a certain amount of content too
Absolutely.
from Amazon as well.
Yep, same here.
Not Hulu. I'm not big on Hulu. I tried
I
Hulu
haven't-
for a while.
I haven't done Hulu.
Didn't like it.
I do Netflix.
Yep.
Big Netflix. I have Amazon Prime. I don't watch a lot on Amazon. Just I don't know why. I just don't.
I'm with you on that, Larry. I'm a big Netflix fan. So
And Apple TV type stuff. So
Yeah. My favorite piece of technology in my home is my smart things. And obviously there is huge security ramifications for that. But
I'm going down that road too.
I freaking love my smart thing. I mean, I control lights, door locks, garage door.
Alexa, set the upstairs Nest thermostat to 73 degrees, please.
I don't have it linked to my Nest.
You
Because
should.
I don't think the integrations were very good when I looked
It's
at
all
it.
right. It's all right.
Um,
I mean,
I
what do
don't
you,
have
what do you
the-
really want to do with your Nest? You want to change the thermostat?
I do have a Fire TV gaming edition, and the Alexa on it is really good. I haven't bit the bullet and gotten the Echo thing,
We have the Echo.
but I like the smart things. To me is the best, and I've done a lot of custom switches, swapped out switches.
Yep.
I have a Philips Hue that's linked to the smart things. So, for example, I just got the Philips Hue switch, and I put smart bulbs in the lights above my island, and it has 3 modes. It's like super bright as high as it can go, medium, and then night light. Freaking! So I can program it so they're like night light automatically. And I got the
on.
Philips Hue, the Bloom. I have one Bloom. The Blooms are kind of expensive, but they're awesome. And so it goes on when it gets dark, and then I change the color for the season. So like right now, it's this nice like summery kind of green color, and when Halloween comes, it'll be orange, and Christmas comes, it'll be red. I don't know. I think it's the coolest piece of technology.
yeah, that's really interesting, Paul. I'm not into it at all. The smart stuff for the house, only because I don't trust it at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a different take. I mean, I think if someone really wants to get into my house, like if you're gonna hack my smart things to unlock my door, if you have that level of skill, you're probably going to get into my house when I'm not there anyway.
Yep.
So-
The other one too is that much like my RFID implant that we did years ago, lets us be the bastions of the technology. Let's put it
Right.
in and we'll play with it and
Yes.
find out how we can help make it better.
Exactly.
So I had a funny experience recently on that. I'm getting into the house comment. I took out my lockpicks because I was bored one Saturday, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to pick my locks on the house just to see how fast I can do it." And it turns out it was really, really
You said
fast.
that. Yeah, you said it was way too easy. Yeah.
And I went to the hardware store and just bought updated locks, and the more recent lock technology is much harder to pick.
Yeah.
So I was pretty pleased with having gone through that exercise. 'Cause I was like, wow, that was way too easy.
Yep.
Anyway,
Okay, so what's the next one here? What qualities would you look for if you had to hire one security person for your organization?
One in your organization.
me, it would be thirst for knowledge, thirst for endless knowledge. Somebody that was not.
And no, Joff, the question was qualities, so it doesn't have to be limited to one quality.
Well,
you just have to hire one person.
Credentials is one thing, but somebody that's like been in the trenches and has a thirst for knowledge. Those are my two biggies.
Mm-hmm. So when someone who has some experience and passion to learn, and is an effective communicator.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely the curiosity factor has to be there. Teachable and willingness to learn is definitely key. And even if they don't have communication skills, as long as they're willing to improve upon, whatever skill, technical skills, that willingness to improve themselves, I think, is probably the most important thing for me, to be honest with you.
I think communication and written and oral, both forms, are very, very important these days.
But I mean, not everyone is born with those skills, or
that's true.
Has developed those skills. So I think as long as you have a willingness to learn those skills, that's good. What is the most influential software developed for the security industry? Now, us being primarily, offensive researchers, we might, have a different take on this. It could be the most influential to you in what you do. Job, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I like so many things from the perspective of software that help me out on a daily basis from the offensive perspective. But I would have to say the ability to capture packets. I know this is very fundamental, but like TCP dump, I think is freaking awesome.
Yeah, or libpcap in general, right?
Yeah, or libpcap.
Well, I mean, we could all say the Linux kernel, the GNU utilities, and Python, right?
Well,
that would be my answer, right?
But those weren't written for the security industry.
No,
and I would also maybe argue, Joff, that libpcap and TCP dump were not written for the security industry.
True. Okay, well, if I'm going to deviate from there, I would have to say the evolution of signature-based detection technology in general.
That's still not software, Joff.
Sure it is.
We're talking maybe not the tool that we like to use, but we're talking influential to the security industry.
Shall I give Joff an example?
Okay, freaking Metasploit then.
Yeah. So that was.
I think the answer to this is Metasploit. You can talk about the influence that it's had on the industry to say that if there's an exploit for it in Metasploit, holy crap, we have to patch it now. To me, having influence on things.
And the fact that the Metasploit exists instead of having to do all of that problem solving beforehand to make an exploit work, that now it just works.
But I don't spend a lot of time in Metasploit anymore. And you sound like you don't either. Joff, you probably don't either, right?
Actually,
there's a time and place for it.
I still use it for testing and validating C2 channels. Against customers where they're structured.
It still has its place. Even the advanced toolkits, it has its place for certain tasks because it's like
and then there's the time where you have to get totally nostalgic and you find that MSO 8067 box.
Yeah, there's always that.
Because there's
always invariably in an environment, even if I've compromised them in a different way, I will end up nailing up some sort of Metasploit C2 channel just for the richness of the ability that it gives you to move from there.
Yeah. So for me, Metasploit, because if you think about it, made things so much easier, lowered the bar for the attackers, which meant the defenders had to increase the bar so much, which developed all of these new technologies and improved people's thoughts about how to implement them and to spawn new attack tools that would work with Metasploit, which meant the defenders, it was really, to me, the pinnacle of where the arms race started.
Yeah. No,
if we think about that, I'd relate that maybe to the beginning of the Cold War. That all of a sudden this new thing has been, and now we've got this race. That was the first hydrogen bomb.
I think it was the first thing that made people's thoughts coalesce around a central goal, or goals plural, which was really very important.
Sorry, place my drink order.
Yep.
With that new olive juice that we got, I'm curious to see what that does. Thanks, Keith. What would you say to the youth today about hacking and security?
You're so fucked.
Oh. No, this is what I would say is don't look for a shortcut. Spend the time. Read the protocols.
Wow, Joff. I'm
Get
working.
off my lawn.
I'm working on a new talk. And
Thanks, Larry.
I'm working on a new talk, and Joff just hit on one of the points in my talk. And I don't want to publicly disclose what my talk title is or what I'm talking about yet. I'll explain it during the break. But Joff just hit on one of the points.
I mean, this was my con thing. In a lot of conferences, I've encountered a lot of younger folks trying to get into the industry, and they're like, well, how do I be like you all of a sudden? That's typically the question.
Yeah,
know
so
how
they're
you
like,
be-
wait, I can just get Kali, which probably is the other. I mean, it's a full distribution with a lot of tools on it, but probably the other most influential. We see that in use in TV shows like Mr. Robot all the time now.
Yep.
But I don't know where I was going with that. I was distracted.
Ease
'cause I was-
of use, and yeah. But yeah,
How
do you get like me overnight? You don't.
Yeah,
it's
use Kali and Metasploit, right? Like that's what I do. I'm like, no,
you use
no.
Kali and Metasploit, but use them correctly.
And they're
in a
like,
way.
how did you get
and
your
I
start?
would-
And I'm like,
I
I
would
was a sysadmin, and then the firewall guy got sick.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then they're like, well, that takes too long. That means I got to be a sysadmin and wait for someone to get sick. I'm like, no.
Yes.
You're misunderstanding the point.
Yes. Spend
But
your time in
actually,
the trenches.
if I was to boil it down and try to give them an accelerated program, the two things I would say is learn protocols, learn networking, and become a software developer. If you do those things, that's going to give you a big kickstart.
All
in the right
let's
direction.
not talk about how to get you started in information security because we've talked about that too much. What would you say to today's youth? That's what Joff would say. What would you say, Larry?
What would I say to them about it? That get used to it. Privacy is dead. Long live privacy. We said that many years ago on the podcast, and that it's here to stay. It's going to become more and more ingrained part of our lifestyle as we get more and more technology. There's going to be more and more security flaws, and it's just going to be going to be a way of life.
I would say don't hack stuff without permission, especially today.
Good point.
Because that has so many heinous repercussions. Just
my
don't,
gosh. Yeah.
don't do. Even if you're questioning it, whether you should do something or not, you probably should stop and go do it in your lab.
If you're inspired by some of the old school hackers who just went and did it, don't.
Don't be inspired by that, but then go back and do it in your lab, or do it with the person's permission who owns that application or system or network.
And join a bug bounty program so you can do it with permission.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, that's an excellent point, Larry. But what you said was also excellent, and I don't think we say it often enough on the show. We get paid to do this stuff, but it's under contract and with strict scope and with strict rules of engagement that our customer is giving us. We don't do this just on a whim. And so, need to make sure that, I know we joke about it a lot, right?
Yep.
We joke, that was awesome, I pwned them, yay. But yeah, you can get thrown in jail. It's a federal offense.
Yep. And even the same with some of these IoT type of things. If you go and buy some IoT type of stuff and you start hacking at it, be careful. Be careful because you're signing end user license agreements when you open the packages and
Got to be careful today.
buy used off of eBay.
So that's the host perspective here on Security Weekly. We're going to take a short break, come back and talk about the security news for this week. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere.